And we're back on the road. We're coming to you from Broome County Forum Theater. We're in Binghamton, New York. Voters in this great state will head to the polls on Tuesday. Tonight, 2016, presidential candidate Senator Ted Cruz joins us for the entire hour. We have a large audience watching the show, and they were invited by the Cruz campaign. Welcome, Binghamton. Anyway, it's our privilege to have back 2016 Republican presidential candidate Senator Cruz. How are you?
Sean, I'm doing terrific.
Boy,
Great
I
to
see you've got one of those step detector
things.
things.
The Fitbits.
Yeah. How many a day on the campaign trail?
You know, it's actually pitiful. You spend a lot of time on planes, on buses, on cars, and so my count is embarrassingly low. The goal is 10,000 steps a day, but I'm sorry to tell you, when we're crisscrossing the state, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah. You know, a lot has been made, even last night, about your comment, New York values. Now, we have a governor in New York. His name is Andrew Cuomo. And he actually...
Popular man.
Yeah, very popular guy, popular governor. And he actually talked about, well, those conservatives that are pro-life and believe in the right to bear arms and that are anti-gay. Well, I'm not anti-gay. I'm pro-traditional marriage. They have no place in New York. So I said, well, okay, I'm going to take my money and leave because we have a 10% state income tax here anyway. But it's become a big issue in the campaign. I want to give you a chance to respond.
Well, sure. Look, the phrase New York values was actually not my phrase. It came initially from Donald Trump, from an interview that he gave with Meet the Press a number of years ago. And he was explaining his strong support for partial birth abortion. And his explanation was, hey, I'm from New York. Those are New York values. They're not Iowa values. And so that was his own explanation. And, you know, I would note the point you just made a second ago. Last week, I was down in the Bronx and was meeting with a number of Hispanic and African-American pastors, including a Democratic state senator, Senator Ruben Diaz. And, you know, Senator Diaz is a pastor, and he was mentioning, he brought up New York values, and he said, listen, I'm a Democrat, an elected Democrat. And he brought up exactly what you said that Cuomo said. He said, my Democratic governor and my party told me if I'm pro-life, if I support traditional marriage, if I believe in the Second Amendment, there's no place for me in New York. And Senator Diaz, a Democrat, said, those are the values we're fed up with, the values of liberal Democrats who are intolerant to the common sense values of most of the men and women of New York.
Yeah. You know, I know that you know my background, and I was born and raised in New York. I have a special place in my heart, and we saw greatness out of the American people, the people in New York on 9/11. Upstate help, Long Island help, and the entire country, in fairness, rallied around. There are so many good people here.
Absolutely.
But governing has been horrible in this state. And especially up here in upstate New York and Binghamton and other areas, they economically have been suffering for decades.
Right.
How, if you're elected president, do you help them?
Well, and no one knows the negative consequences of liberal Democratic policies more than the people of New York, because they've been suffering under them. They're seeing jobs going away. You know, a perfect example of those liberal Democratic values is Governor Cuomo. Will not allow the people of New York to develop the Marcellus Shale. You know, in Pennsylvania, there are people getting high-paying jobs. There are people providing for their families. Their property values are going up. The Marcellus Shale extends here into New York, but knucklehead politicians apparently think New Yorkers don't want jobs. That doesn't make any sense.
Those are high-paying jobs.
They are high-paying jobs. We are seeing all across this country an energy renaissance. And it is Democratic politicians in New York and California where the resources are there, but they won't allow us to develop them. And the answer, my #1 priority as president, is bringing jobs and economic growth back to this country, bringing high-paying jobs back to America.
You mentioned the Marcellus Shale, and you mentioned Pennsylvania. We are the Saudi Arabia. We are the Middle East of natural gas.
Yes.
And it would have the added component of not begging countries that hate us for what is the economic powerhouse for our economy, which is energy. We could become energy independent. How big is that a component in terms of the economy and creating jobs and revenue for the country?
It is an enormous component. You know, A couple of years ago, I gave a speech on the Senate floor where I took a map of the entire United States, and every county was color-coded for whether median income had gone up or gone down. That map looks almost exactly like a geological map of shale formations. And in fact, I got a clear plastic overlay of the shale formations, and you could see where you have the Bakken Shale or the Eagle Ford or the Permian or the Utica. You could see income spiking like crazy. In the Marcellus, in all those Pennsylvania counties, median income has gone through the roof, and yet the line from New York to Pennsylvania, almost like the finger of God drew it. The counties on the other side of that line, even though they have the resources, their income hadn't gone up. Just the same, the Monterey Shale in California, none of those counties, the income had gone up. And the one exception was the counties in and around Washington, D.C. that were bright green, that have gotten fat and happy. And almost every other county in America, income has stagnated or gone down.
Do you believe the Saudis have artificially driven down the price of a barrel of oil to take away American jobs, for example, in North Dakota and Texas and Louisiana, and ultimately that would be New York and Pennsylvania?
Sure.
Do you think they did it on purpose to drive natural gas businesses out of business?
Well, that's certainly part of it, and I think the Saudis are flooding the market with oil. Another component, though, is the Fed. I mean, we have had Fed policy that's had a strong dollar, a weak dollar, a strong dollar, a weak dollar, and those booms and busts. Right now, we have an artificially strong dollar. That ends up driving down the cost of commodities, whether it is the cost of oil and gas, or whether it's the cost of coal, or whether it's the cost of steel, or whether, if you're a farmer, the cost of your crops. We need to have, with monetary policy, stability. Not a strong dollar, not a weak dollar, but a stable and sound dollar.
You know, I want to stay on this message of the economy for a minute, because, you know, I pointed out there's this cute little girl over there, and I don't know if we can get a picture with our jib shot over there. If she stands out in the middle aisle there, we can. You know, we've now doubled the national debt for that little girl.
Yeah.
We have now created an America where 95 million of our fellow Americans are out of work, 50 million in poverty, 46 on food stamps, doubled the debt. And I'm thinking, I don't see any way out of this. They're not talking about negative interest rates. If we put our money in the banks are going to charge you to keep your money. That's how bad things have gotten because of government involvement.
Well, they're doing that in Japan. They've got negative interest rates in Japan.
So how do we solve the debt? How do we get the jobs back? And how quickly could it happen?
Right.
Elect Cruz,
He's a very wise gentleman. There is only one way to turn around the debt, and that is to bring economic growth back. And the key to growth, the heart of our economy, it doesn't come from Washington, D.C. It comes from small businesses all across this country. And the way you bring growth is you lift the boot of the federal government off the back of the necks of small business. Two-thirds of all new jobs, they come from small businesses. So if I'm elected president, we will repeal every word of Obamacare. We'll pass a simple flat tax and abolish the IRS.
Is a flat tax This is an important question, because a lot of people, I've studied the flat tax and the fair tax. I actually like both ideas. But is it revenue neutral in terms of the government? And can we do all of this? You know, Chris Christie was running for office, said, Social Security's gone. They already stole it. Do we have to touch entitlements, Social Security and Medicare?
We can absolutely save and strengthen Social Security and Medicare. We've got to. They're fundamental bulwarks of our society, and I'm campaigning on a very clear reform plan to protect and save and strengthen them. But if you look at the tax plan that I have, and I have a very, very clear and detailed plan. You can read about it on our website. It's tedcruz.org, tedcruz.org. But you know, look, today is April 15th. It's normally tax day. We got an extra couple of days till Monday.
Oh, sorry.
But you know, today's a good day to reflect on how things will be different in just a couple of years if we win this election. Because my simple flat tax for a typical family of four, first $36,000 you earn, you pay nothing. No income tax, no payroll tax, no nothing.
If you don't pay a payroll tax, Do you still get Social Security benefits?
You absolutely still get your Social Security benefits. Now, above $36,000, everyone pays the same simple, flat 10% tax. No longer do hedge fund billionaires pay a lower effective tax rate than their secretaries. It's fair and even and uniform. And then on the business side, we eliminate the corporate income tax, which is the highest in the developed world. We eliminate the Obamacare taxes. We eliminate the payroll taxes, which are the biggest taxes most working men and women pay, and we also eliminate the death tax, which is incredibly unfair.
That's corrupt. You know, I know this came up in earlier debates. I know for most people here this is probably meaningless, but I don't know how many of you know that there are actually trillions, not millions or billions, trillions of dollars parked offshore that corporations will not bring back to the United States because of the high rate of taxes that they will pay. It's corporate inversion. You can incentivize them, repatriate the money by lowering the rate, but wouldn't that create jobs and manufacturing centers and factories and trillions of dollars thrown into the economy?
Absolutely, yes. That's what my tax plan does. It'll bring trillions of dollars back. We replace all of those business taxes instead with a simple 16% business flat tax that is fair and uniform. No longer do giant corporations with armies of accountants pay less, effectively pay little or no taxes, while small businesses get hammered with a punitive 35% corporate income tax.
You know, this raises. So would they pay 16% to bring it back, or would you give them a break so that we can encourage the building of manufacturing centers?
So there's a one-time repatriation tax of 10%, which would bring in trillions of dollars. And what this plan will do, you know, the Nonpartisan Tax Foundation studied this plan, and they score everyone's plans. They concluded that the Cruz simple flat tax would produce 4.9 million new jobs, would raise wages, would raise after-tax income for everybody. And, you know, the average family, Sean, under the Cruz flat tax, over the next decade would take home an additional $7,600. That's real money when you're struggling to make ends meet.
I want to tell you how bad it is in New York. I spent a decade of my life doing every job in a restaurant, from dishwashing to cook to bartending and being a waiter. I spent 10 years of my life in contracting, in the building trades, doing everything, laying tile, framing houses. In New York right now, I pay a 40% federal income tax. I pay 9.9% state tax, 4% city tax. I pay my FICA taxes. I live in Nassau County, the second highest property tax county in the country. You live in Texas, you don't have a state or city income tax. That's 15% more of our money that we could keep if New York wasn't so greedy.
That is exactly right.
Isn't that insane?
And I can't solve the problem of left-wing Democratic politicians like Cuomo and Bill de Blasio.
By the way, we call him Comrade de Blasio on the show.
But what I can do is reduce the burdens of Washington that are hammering small businesses, so Washington isn't making it harder. And here in New York, we will see jobs coming back from Mexico, jobs coming back from China. We'll see manufacturing jobs coming back to the state of New York.